The cabin lights dimmed to their cruising glow as the aircraft leveled off at 35,000 feet, slicing through a sky so clear it looked painted. Rows of passengers settled into the quiet rhythm of flight, headphones on, trays down, lives temporarily paused between departure and arrival. Up front, behind a reinforced door and layers of procedure, she flew. Captain Mara Hale sat in the left seat with her hands resting lightly on the controls, posture relaxed but alert. Years of muscle memory kept her movements economical, precise. The hum of the engines wasn't noise to her, it was language. Each vibration, each subtle change in pitch told a story about the aircraft's health. Fuel burn looks clean, her first officer said, scanning the displays. Copy, Mara replied, eyes moving from instruments to the horizon and back again. Calm wasn't something she put on for others. It lived in her bones. The aircraft cruised smoothly for another 20 minutes. Then, without warning, the language changed. A chime sounded, soft but unmistakable. One of the engine indicators flickered. The hum altered pitch, just a shade lower on the right side. To most people, it would have meant nothing. To her, it was a sentence cut short. Engine 2 parameters fluctuating, the first officer said, already reaching for the checklist. Mara didn't rush. She never did. She watched the numbers settle, then dip again, oil pressure falling, temperature rising. The system compensated automatically at first, as it was designed to do. She let it. Machines needed space to correct themselves. Then the warning light illuminated. Engine failure. The cockpit seemed to grow smaller, not from panic, but from focus. Every unnecessary thought fell away. Confirm engine 2 failure, she said evenly. Confirmed. Autothrottle off. I have the aircraft. You have the aircraft. Her hand firmed on the controls as she adjusted yaw, compensating for the loss of thrust. The plane shuddered once, then steadied. Training took over. Procedures layered over instinct, instinct sharpened by experience. She spoke again, voice level. Run the checklist. As the first officer read through each step, she executed them without hesitation. Fuel cut. Engine secured. Systems rebalanced. The aircraft responded, obedient and steady on one engine. It wasn't graceful, but it was stable. Behind the cockpit door, 236 passengers felt only a mild shift. A few looked up from their screens. A woman tightened her grip on an armrest. Somewhere near the back, a child laughed at something on a tablet. No screams, no chaos. Mara glanced at the navigation display. Nearest suitable airport, 200 miles ahead. Weather, clear. Runway length, adequate. She did the math in her head, fast and clean. We'll divert, she said. Single engine cruise is stable. The first officer nodded. Cabin, not yet, she replied. Let's confirm everything stays boring. Minutes passed. The aircraft held steady, altitude carefully managed to reduce strain. Every gauge told the same story. One engine, yes, but under control. Only then did she key the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, voice calm and unhurried, this is your captain speaking. We've had a technical issue with one of our engines. The aircraft is designed to fly safely in this condition, and everything is under control. As a precaution, we'll be diverting to another airport. Please remain seated and follow the cruise instructions. Her tone carried confidence without drama. No jargon, no fear, just facts. In the cabin, tension loosened. People listened, and believed her. Back in the cockpit, the first officer watched her quietly for a moment. You've done this before, he said, not as a question. Mara didn't look away from the instruments. Once, she replied. Different aircraft, worse weather. He absorbed that, then went back to his duties. Outside, the sky stretched endlessly blue. Inside, the aircraft pressed on with one beating heart instead of two, every system balanced on discipline and trust. Mara's eyes flicked briefly to a small photograph clipped beside her seat. Faded edges, younger faces, flight suits, a memory from another lifetime. She didn't linger on it. The past had no place in this cockpit, not right now. There were 236 lives behind her, and she intended to bring every one of them home. Air traffic control answered immediately, their voices crisp and professional, but Mara could hear the subtle shift in tone the moment she declared the situation. Not panic, priority. Flight 782, radar contact confirmed. You are cleared direct to Jackson Field. Descend and maintain flight level 240. Emergency crews will be standing by. Direct Jackson. 240, Mara replied. Her voice never changed. Calm was contagious in the cockpit, she made sure of that. As the aircraft began its gradual descent, the workload increased, not explosively but steadily. Single-engine flight demanded constant attention. Every adjustment mattered. Speed, altitude, trim, fuel balance. The aircraft would forgive small errors, but it would remember big ones. The first officer monitored systems, calling out numbers in a steady rhythm. Hydraulics stable, electrical load within limits, cabin pressure holding. Mara nodded, absorbing everything. She trusted him, but she verified. Always. She requested the extended checklist, working through it methodically. Nothing was skipped, nothing rushed. Outside the cockpit windows, clouds thickened slightly, painting soft gray layers across the sky. Still good weather, but less forgiving visually. In the cabin, the flight attendants moved with quiet efficiency. Training showed in the way they smiled, reassured, checked seatbelts without raising alarms. Passengers whispered to one another now, curiosity turning into concern, but not fear. Not yet. A man near the aisle leaned toward his wife. She sounded confident, he said. She did, the woman replied. That helps. Back in the cockpit, Mara briefed the approach. We'll come in slightly fast. Longer landing roll. I want max runway. Agreed, the first officer said. Wind's calm. She adjusted her seat slightly, rolling her shoulders once. A small movement, unnoticed by anyone else, but it released tension built over decades of moments like this. Moments when skill mattered more than luck. As they descended through 20,000 feet, turbulence brushed the aircraft, not violent but persistent. The plane responded with a gentle shudder, like a reminder that physics was still in charge. Hold her steady, Mara murmured, not to the aircraft but to herself. Another call came from ATC. Flight 782, confirm souls on board. Mara answered without pause. 236 passengers. Crew of 7. There was a brief silence on the line. Then, copy. Emergency services are fully deployed. She acknowledged and switched frequencies. For the first time since the engine failed, she allowed herself a single deep breath. Not relief, focus. This was the most critical phase. Most incidents didn't end in the air. They ended here, on approach, when fatigue and overconfidence made room for mistakes. She wouldn't allow either. The runway came into view far ahead, a thin strip of gray against green fields. She lined up carefully, correcting for asymmetrical thrust with subtle rudder inputs. The aircraft wanted to drift. She refused to let it. Approach stable, the first officer said. Continue, she replied. At 1,000 feet, alarms were silent. Systems were steady. Airspeed perfect. She made the cabin announcement herself this time, brief and controlled. Flight attendants, prepare for landing. In the cabin, hands tightened around armrests. Some passengers closed their eyes. Others stared out the windows, watching the ground rise to meet them. Mara's world narrowed again. To the runway, the numbers, the glide path. Her breathing synced with the aircraft's descent. Every second stretched, not with fear, but with weight. 500 feet, 300, 100. She eased the nose up, reducing descent rate. The aircraft floated, just a fraction longer than normal. Then the wheels touched down. Firm, controlled. Applause didn't erupt immediately. There was a heartbeat of silence first, people processing the reality of solid ground. Then the sound came, spreading through the cabin like a wave. Clapping, cheers. Someone cried openly. Mara kept working. Reverse thrust engaged on the remaining engine. Brakes applied carefully. The aircraft slowed, steady and obedient, until it rolled safely to a stop on the runway. Only then did she exhale fully. Welcome to Jackson Field, she said quietly, switching off the thrust reverser. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft, lights flashing but sirens silent. Fire crews watched closely as the plane taxied to a remote stand. In the cockpit, the first officer finally smiled. Textbook, he said. Mara allowed herself a small nod. Good crew, good aircraft. But as she shut down the systems, she felt it, that familiar sensation she hadn't known in years. Not adrenaline, not relief, recognition. Somewhere beyond the runway, unseen eyes were already reviewing the data. Watching how she handled the aircraft. Not just what she did, but how she did it. The landing was over. The story, she sensed, was only beginning. the aircraft sat quietly now, engines silent, surrounded by flashing lights that reflected off the fuselage like ripples on water. From the cockpit window, Mara could see emergency crews easing back, their posture relaxed. No smoke, no urgency, just procedure winding down. Only then did the weight of what had happened truly settle. She removed her headset and set it carefully on the console. Her hands, steady throughout the flight, finally felt the faint tremor she'd kept at bay. Not fear, release. She welcomed it, just for a moment. The first officer broke the silence. Cabin wants to know if they can disarm doors. Go ahead, Mara said. Normal deplaning. When the cockpit door opened, the lead flight attendant stepped in, eyes bright with relief. They're asking about you, she said softly. A lot of them. Mara gave a tired smile. Tell them they did great. All of you. As passengers began to deplane, the applause came again, this time louder, more personal. People paused at the cockpit door to thank her. Some shook her hand, others just nodded, eyes glassy with gratitude. A man in a business suit whispered, "You saved my life." A mother held her child a little tighter as she passed. Mara accepted it all with quiet grace. She'd learned long ago that moments like this weren't about absorbing praise. They were about letting others release fear. Once the cabin emptied, airport officials arrived, followed by airline representatives. Reports were signed, data recorders secured, questions asked and answered with professional brevity. Then something unexpected happened. A uniformed officer stepped forward, not airline, not airport. Air Force. Captain Hale, he asked. She straightened slightly. Yes, you're requested in the operations room. There are guests. Mara felt a subtle shift in her chest. She nodded. Understood. The operations room was calm, screens displaying radar replays and flight data. Standing near the main console were two men in flight suits, patches unmistakable. F-22 pilots. Their helmets rested under their arms. They turned as she entered. One of them smiled first. Not casual, respectful. Ma'am. She returned the nod. Gentlemen, we were monitoring the incident, the other pilot said. Training exercise nearby. When your aircraft declared the emergency, we were assigned to observe. Mara's expression didn't change. Then you saw a commercial diversion. Nothing more. The first pilot shook his head. No, we saw technique. He tapped the screen, bringing up a replay of her descent. Your energy management, rudder inputs, decision timing. That wasn't standard airline handling. Silence hung for a beat. The second pilot spoke carefully. We've only seen that kind of control from people with a different background. Mara met their gaze steadily. I fly the aircraft I'm assigned, she said. Safely. They exchanged a glance, then the first pilot reached into his pocket and placed something on the table. A worn patch. Faded. Familiar. Top Gun. The room seemed to hold its breath. You flew with us, he said, not a question. Once, Mara replied. A long time ago. You never list it, the second pilot said. I don't need to, she answered. The first pilot smiled again, this time with something like awe. When we saw the way you handled that engine-out approach, we knew. There are things you don't forget. Muscle memory, mindset. Mara looked at the screen once more, at the smooth arc of the approach path. I had 236 people depending on me, she said. Labels don't matter at 35,000 feet. The operations manager cleared his throat, visibly unsure whether he should even be in the room. The F-22 pilot stepped back, giving her a clean, unmistakable nod. Not casual, not friendly, a salute. From one aviator to another, he said. Well flown. Mara returned it, not sharply, but sincerely. As the pilots left, the room felt quieter than before. Not empty, just settled. Later, alone in the crew lounge, Mara finally allowed herself to sit. She stared at her hands, at the faint lines earned from decades of flying, military, test ranges, simulators, commercial routes. Different chapters, same sky. Her phone buzzed with a message from the airline. Outstanding performance. Full review pending. Expect recognition. She set the phone down. Recognition had its place, but it wasn't why she flew. Outside, another aircraft lifted off, engines roaring, climbing into the blue. Mara watched it go, a small smile touching her lips. Today, she had saved 236 lives on one engine. And somewhere in the airspace above, legends had noticed, not because she asked to be seen, but because excellence always leaves a signature. She stood, shouldered her bag, and walked back toward the terminal. Tomorrow, she would fly again.